Hello and welcome to Power to the People with me, Graeme Pryce. Have you seen the state of the papers in the last few days? Seriously, if you haven't, then just Google Monday's front pages or something like that. You won't need to see much more than the front page to get an idea of why the stench of rancid rage gammon is hanging heavy in the air across the UK at the moment. We all know we live on an unfortunate island of indoctrinated imbeciles that swallow pints of pure populist propaganda every morning. The state of the polls at the moment show that is definitely a fact that we have to contend with. But I feel there's something a little bit different going on here. I was going to go and collect a few key quotes and comments from places like Facebook and Twitter, but then I realised I'd just walk away angry, feeling like I'd wasted my time with some gullible gammons. So I thought I'd just make a little video and give you my opinion on one of the few decent things Starmer's done recently with the EU deal. We'll get on it right after this. 'Tis Power to the People with Graeme Pryce, where sometimes he's naughty or nice. If you like the vibe, hit like and subscribe. But don't hit the like button twice. Thank you. Now, of course, the various stacks of sentient shite that have the audacity to call themselves human are immediately calling it a surrender because they're absolutely furious that their favourite racist endeavour is being rewound to some degree. They don't have anything they can offer to suggest Brexit was a success, though, so they're just looking back at all the buzzwords and lies they used to use to fool the electorate the first time and trying to rehash the same old twaddle, except it's not working quite as well this time. There are some things that will take further years of negotiation to sort out, but there is some immediate benefit for exporters of things like fresh meat and dairy products and vegetables and timber and that kind of thing, which will give an immediate benefit to small businesses. Though the state of the Brexit deal that ballbag Johnson fudged for us, followed by the pandemic, has meant that we now have fewer smaller businesses in the UK than ever. Of course, the right-wing wankers that write the headlines don't give a shite about small businesses, though. No, that's not the demographic they're targeting, is it? The deal is also beneficial for both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, who can now export across the Irish Sea to the UK and EU again without needing veterinary certifications. The bonkers Brexit bellends who are calling this a surrender are conveniently ignoring the fact that all this means is we will be meeting EU standards again, just like we did before. It's almost like they want us to have lower standards and harder lives or something, isn't it? Nigel Frottage is wailing about the fishing industry again because he remembers that he managed to fool loads of people into not realising that he's a fucking liar in 2016 by pretending that fishing is some huge part of the UK economy that they should be angry about all of the time. Of course, it actually accounts for less than 1% of our GDP. And he knows this, but, it worked for him so well last time, didn't it? So he's decided to tell the same old lies to the British public again. In reality, practically nothing has changed except that Labour have agreed to continue with the current rules for another 12 years. In fact, Nigel isn't bothering to tell his sycophants that the previously mentioned rule change will mean that fishermen are able to sell fish and seafood, shellfish, to the EU again. So it's actually a good thing for the fishing industry. But he knows that probably less than 5% of reform voters even live near the sea, let alone own a fishing boat. So, they'll just blindly believe whatever he tells them about fishing and make no effort whatsoever to check that what he says is true. As with everything, he's just trying to fool the British public into believing his lies again. He's also not mentioning that the removal of veterinary checking will eliminate huge costs involved in exporting to the EU under Johnson's oven-ready deal, allowing British fishermen to actually make significantly more from exporting than they manage to do now. Remember when Jacob Rees-Mogg tried to tell UK fishermen that they should be fine with losing a portion of their income because The fish were happier to be British fish. They're in British waters and they're happier for it. What an absolute twat of a man. Good Lord. There's been a new commitment to review the Erasmus programme, which allows the exchange of students between the EU and the UK. And the Youth Mobility Scheme, which is currently in place, will now allow impoverished UK universities to reap some reward from European students. Even Brexit bellend Steve Baker has agreed that this is a good thing. But of course, the rags that repeat the rhetoric of the racist and regressive are trying to rubbish that arrangement as well. Because of course they fucking are. They can afford to let their kids study in any country in the world because they're rich. But they don't want your kids to be able to do that. No. I have mixed feelings about the UK military doctrine these days. I'm proud of a lot of our wartime history, especially in the First and Second World Wars. But I don't like the fact that we supply weapons all over the world, even right up to this day, including to several countries that use them to perpetuate genocidal ideologies. It's undeniably a large part of our economy though, and now we will have access to a £126 billion rearmament scheme, which we will definitely be benefiting from as we build some of the best armoured vehicles and weapons in the world, and tanks, let alone in Europe. The gaining GAMMON monsters are conveniently ignoring the fact that we will now have access to EU policing data as well, despite them continually claiming to be big fans of law and order, because they know that they can't sell that as something bad to their gullible followers. Even raging GAMMON knobheads want the police to be able to do their jobs, don't they? Farage, Braverman, Patel and the like are also not really mentioning that British border forces will now have access to much more information and means to stop the boats due to enhanced cooperation with Europol and its European Migrant Smuggling Centre. It's almost as if they don't actually want anything to improve and would rather just spend the time convincing people to be angry and hate people, isn't it? Thank you for watching if you've gotten this far. This wasn't intended to be a detailed breakdown of the deal. I just wanted to highlight the continuing stupidity of the Brexit press and the puerile no-marks that read it and believe it every day. There are a few other things in it that are a bit less noteworthy because even though they're interesting, they won't take effect for years. And despite what the tabloids are saying, it isn't a stealth re-entry into the EU via the back door, but it is a step forward in reversing the insanity and stupidity that Brexit brought to us. It's interesting to note that despite his lies and propaganda regarding the deal and his confected outrage that he's sharing all over social media, Nigel Farage never actually bothered to turn up for the debate about it in the House of Commons today. You'd expect him to be in America, gargling Trump's orange balls and pretending to be important, but apparently he's in France. I think I'll give it a few days and I'll have a look at what the polls are saying. If you've been able to stomach having a look at the front pages, you'd think there's some huge swelling of support for Brexit still out there, and these tabloid twattery logs are just reporting the will of the people. They aren't. They're expressing the views of a few weird billionaire media barons who want us all to be more miserable than they are, despite them having more wealth than they could spend in 100 lifetimes. Well, I don't want to be wealthy. It seems like it turns loads of people into bigoted twats. But I do appreciate it if you want to contribute to the battle against bullshit here on the channel. If so, you can find the links to PayPal, Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee page frolicking freely in the waters of the description box. And as always, the join button for memberships is below. Now, obviously, that isn't all I have to say. But it is as much of what I've got to say as I'm going to say today. Ta-da. It actually accounts for less than 1% of our GDP, and he knows this, of course, but it worked for him last time, so he's decided to try and sell the same old lies about the fish, something about fish. Jesus knew all about fish, actually, didn't he? Could turn 5 into 5,000. I bet Peter... They'll be believing Nigel Farage can... Oh, never mind.